Microsoft is they don't mind selling your data. They're pretty happy to do that. And this is really like the ultimate database, right? Because it's not just your browsing history or your usage history of certain apps. It's like everything that you're doing, no matter what. So they're kind of building up this big index of data around you.
ChatGPT wasn't designed to summarize text or wasn't designed to have conversations. It was designed to complete things. And the emergent capabilities were like, you can summarize text now. Wow, didn't know I could do that.
Tech is getting hit pretty hard with layoffs. I think 2022 had more than 2020 and 21 put together as far as tech layoffs or just overall job layoffs in the US. But then 2023 had even more than 2022. Yeah, so now 2024 is already starting pretty strong with the tech layoffs. And, obviously they're trying to explain that it's AI. Everybody's focusing on AI, and they think that AI is going to replace 40% of the jobs out there.
Wow.
Which is substantial. We don't have to worry about Microsoft ever getting hacked. They've never been hacked before.
yeah, exactly.
That could be very nerve-wracking.
Yep.
If you got everything has access to your
but then,
thing.
Yeah, one place of everything.
It is interesting. I would say if everything's going into the cloud, I mean, a lot of it's happening already.
Yeah.
A lot of things are backed up. And then you look at your device, like your phone, that you often do your banking and everything. So a lot of that's there already. Probably what we need to look at is, you did say, Joe, that a lot of it's stored locally. And that's where I think these more specific or smaller models that can be run on a machine solve a lot of the privacy issues, because you're not sending data, out into the cloud and it's being stored for anyone to use. It's central to that compute. So you buy an AI computer, the model's on there, and it's actually going to feed it and learn from all of that, which is, so it's your model in some ways.
I think that may actually even be what they're doing, a bit of obviously a hybrid approach, because in the one sentence it says connected to and enhanced by large language models. This is talking about Copilot PCs running in our Azure cloud in concert with small language models. So it seems like they may actually be small language models, maybe doing like the simple data extraction part of actually like pulling the data out of those screenshots into the index. That makes sense to have it all done locally, right? You shouldn't have to farm that out to the cloud to do, because it doesn't need a large language model to do that. That's a very specific task it's got to do, like, pull out data, and you can fine tune it to that task. So exactly, that's a good point. And got a few more.
I think the one point I'll add in just before you go on to the others is just getting back to that recall section. That's really, when I read about that, I was thinking, well, this is sort of getting to the vision we've chatted about before of a purely conversational UI for everything. So your operating system offers you this sort of chat history in some ways of everything you've done, visualized in a specific way. And this could really be the start of moving towards that, because you have that sort of log of everything you've worked on. And eventually it could almost come down to one sort of interface where, you're sort of seeing what you've done and where you've done it almost in, so it almost merges applications together. And you sort of have all these sort of multi-functional, whether you want to look at it as cards or something, through a central interface. And you're just moving through those, doing different specific activities. So it'd be interesting to see where it goes.
Yeah, and I mean, that's an interesting point. I just read that somebody said that Elon Musk wants to make X the application for all. I guess WeChat in China is kind of getting to that super app type of thing where it's doing everything, banking, mortgage, buying a pizza, whatever. It's you're doing everything through one super app. And so if you have that capability through one app, it's going to be able to just manage everything because it has access to everything. So that's an interesting take on our next episode of Black Mirror.
Well, a few more smaller points I can go to, just some of the other concerns I read. And again, like, I'm trying to find a balance between, seeing the positives in this and the good use cases, and then, sort of the concerns that people are seeing. And I think it's good to try and see both. I can often veer onto, just seeing like the problems. So I'm trying to go into this with a good perspective, but we'll see where it goes. But some of the other ones are, especially around enterprise side of things, since this could be applied into all workstations, there could be a lot of analysis being done on employee usage of those machines. And again, this is kind of like Big Brother-ish too, but the technology is there, the capability is there. So, that can be good from a security standpoint, because now there's an index that's tracking and it can flag anything that it sees that may be a security issue and sort of send that up. So you don't have to sort of have log monitors logging through, churning through all logs to try and see if there are any security exploits. It can actually just visually see if someone's doing something that they shouldn't be doing and flag that. And that again could be, outside trained on what that actually looks like and then uploaded. So that's a good side of it, sure. Obviously, the negative side of it is productivity. So, it's tracking everything that you're doing, and very easy to see if you've been sort of like, on your Facebook website for 5 hours that morning and maybe you're not doing much work. I mean, that has always existed, but this is kind of like the next level of that sort of productivity tracking. And, once you have databases of this stuff, it's a lot easier to sort of compare and contrast. So, yeah, positives and negatives there.
That's scary. If it's almost like the efficiency. Some people just need to disconnect for maybe 30 minutes and they're far more productive for the next 3 hours versus some people, they can work a little bit more straight. So
Definitely.
how do you distinguish between the productivity between those two? It should be just the result, the output.
Yeah. And the second one too is...
Shall we jump to the next?
Sorry. I got two more. I'll quickly run through, just because it's, again, interesting sort of things to think about as this technology comes out, what its ramifications are. Again, Microsoft is pretty... I know what the word is. They don't mind selling your data very easily. They're pretty happy to do that. And this is really like the ultimate database, right? Because it's not just your browsing history or your usage history of certain apps. It's like everything that you're doing, no matter what. So they're kind of building up this big index of data around you. And sure, while it may be local, like they could very easily be stripping out all the metadata out of that and sending it up, which I'm sure they want to do. And so while it may not know exactly the things that you're doing, it'll kind of gauge about where you spend your time. And yeah, so a lot of advertising sort of usage around that too. Advertisers would love that data. So yeah, that's an interesting side of it too. Microsoft, obviously this is a product, right? They're selling this to, they're not selling Recall as something that you're buying. They're giving it to everyone for free. And so what are they getting out of that? There's got to be some sort of data cost to that. So it'll be interesting to see how that works out. And then another interesting sort of where I was looking at this too, sort of going back to the enterprise side of things. This is a stretch, but I think it's an interesting thing to think about. If you have your employees doing work all day and you're monitoring them, we talked about monitoring their productivity, but again, you're actually monitoring the tasks that they're doing too. And let's say you have someone whose job it is to capture insurance forms all day or something like that, right? And it's a very repetitive, very straightforward task. The AI is watching that, right? It's understanding what that person is doing. And it could be very easy to build a model of that person's task and their actual job purpose. And to sort of, you get, 10,000 agents all doing that same sort of task. You can build up a pretty good model around that. And now suddenly you can replace positions which were previously thought to be potentially quite complicated or involved, but now can be done with AI, since it's all been trained by those people and what they're actually doing on the machines all day and over months and years of their work. So yeah, interesting side of that too. Yeah, we'll see where that goes. But,
they could sell that for a good bit. Wow.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Any job.
I think I saw somebody said that, there's been tech is getting hit pretty hard with layoffs. I think 2022 had more than 2020 and 21 put together as far as tech layoffs or just overall job layoffs in the US.
Those 2 years are COVID as well, which had pretty big layoffs. So that's terrible.
Yeah.
But then 2023 had even more than 2022. And so, so now 2024 is already starting pretty strong with the tech layoffs. And they think that, obviously they're trying to explain that it's AI. Everybody's focusing on AI. And they think that AI is going to replace 40% of the jobs out there.
Wow.
Which is substantial. If that's the case. Other people are like, well, companies did a lot of overhiring as well.
Yeah.
So maybe that's a part of it, because the pendulum has swung from employee to employer now. So maybe it's just some of that rebalancing, which I think I I tend to agree with a little bit, but we do see, certain jobs getting replaced, or at least, and we discussed this on the last call, where it could be significant, in which, as you're training more and more, definitely certain jobs are going to be taken over by this technology. So it'll be interesting to see where that goes for sure. Next topic, emergent capabilities.
Yeah, I was
Brynley?
just say,
Right.
That's a good segue from Joe's slightly sort of big brother. Okay, this is something that I was looking through a lot of news, and I was like, emergent capability. Well, that's interesting. I don't know too much about that. Let me dig into that. I mean, what happens if I told you guys that things like ChatGPT wasn't designed to summarize text, or wasn't designed to have conversations? It was designed to complete things. And the emergent capabilities were like, we can summarize text now. Wow, didn't know it could do that. So you start thinking, interesting. So anyway, I'll dive into a little bit of detail. I saw this headline: researchers at Amazon have trained a new large language model for text-to-speech that they claim exhibits this sort of emergent ability. And it kind of got me wondering what exactly those emergent abilities are in more depth. And really, I guess, how much of a black box are these models? Like, if these things are just, these abilities are coming out of nowhere, what don't we know about them? So the news article I was looking at was around this base TTS model, which was a 980 million parameter model. And it's sort of the largest text-to-speech model that's been created to date. And now the folks at Amazon trained models of varying sizes on public domain speech data of up to 100,000 hours. And what was interesting is that they found their medium-sized 400 million parameter model that was only trained on 10,000 hours of audio. That was the one that displayed a noticeable improvement on these sort of challenging test sentences. So this really kind of aligned with what a lot of the findings were with the large language models, where they've sort of increased the parameters and then they have more and more emergent behavior that's being shown. So if you're unsure, like just revisiting parameters, we obviously looked at those in our last podcast, and that's, the topic, small language models, where, you can get a bit of an idea on what parameters are. But yeah, what was fascinating is that sort of 980 million parameter model had been trained on 10 times the amount of audio. So 100,000 hours of this audio, but didn't show any further abilities over and above the 400 million parameter model. So it's quite interesting. Okay. It's almost also like we spoke about before, that sort of sweet spot.
Yeah.
Like there can be some growth, you get up to a certain point, but you don't see anything after that. So getting back to what I find the fascinating part is, what could we define emergent behavior as without seeming a bit kind of enigmatic? So we could say emergent behavior is really, I guess, a spontaneous development of complex and unanticipated abilities in the system. And it arises from simple interactions and scaling, but this is the great part, without explicit programming for those abilities. So again, we come back to the purpose of GPT-2. The primary purpose was to predict the next word in a sequence of text. That was it. So this kind of objective that's known as language modeling involves training the model on large amounts of text data, and then it kind of learns the statistical properties and patterns of language. And, the goal was to really create a model that could generate coherent and contextually appropriate text by really continuing a given prompt. So, if you had to say, start a sentence like, I feel like it's a cotton candy at the movies, or whatever the case is, you look at it very basic. So once they started digging into GPT-2, they started realizing that these specific emergent capabilities were coming out. And this is like things like coherent text generation. So even though it was only trained with the sort of simple objective of predicting the next word, it could almost generate coherent and contextually relevant text over long passages of text, which is pretty amazing. And also something called sort of transfer learning, so ability to perform various natural language processor tasks like summarization and translation without without being given any tasks for that, which is fascinating. And then I think one of the most sort of surprising, or I don't know whether the word would be sensational, shocking emergent capabilities of these large language models was sort of shown particularly in GPT-3 was its ability to perform what's called few-shot and zero-shot learning. So few-shot learning is where you give a model, and this is often through prompting, specific tasks looking for the completion. So I'm going to use, they had some examples that used French. I can't speak French, so I'm going to do some Afrikaans translation. So we imagine you prompted with few-shot learning. You said, right, translate from English to Afrikaans. You said, okay, the cat sat on the mat. And you're like, die kat sit op die mat. And then you said, the book is on the table. And it's like, die boek is op die tafel. But now you would say, all right, tell me what, I've prompted you with few-shot learning. Do you know what I'm asking you to do? So you said, all right, the dog barks. And the model would go, well, die hond blaf. So it's really interesting that it hasn't been trained for that at all, but you start giving it few shots and it's like, oh, I know what you're asking for. I can do that for you. But then what's even more surprising was the zero-shot learning. So the ability to perform tasks like that without any specific examples. So you give it the text to translate. It's like, cool, I know about translation. I know what you need me to do. And bam, it's, so I think why it's so, it was so sort of surprising is it just, they really, despite the sort of, they gave it specific sort of content to learn, specific architecture. But again, it comes back to, it was never programmed to do that. And they're just these things that in each sort of, as the parameters are boosted, these emergent abilities or capabilities surface, which is pretty fascinating. So I wanted to get both your thoughts on that. And it's difficult not to sort of go like, oh, that's a black box, but what do you guys think? Genetic algorithms, sort of series of steps that allow us to perform certain behaviors. And a lot of it seems unconscious how much we're following these algorithms without realizing it ourselves. We're like, wait, we've made a lot of decisions today based on evolutionary sort of algorithms. So at the moment, it's not clear what makes us conscious and why we have more self-awareness than potentially other animals. So you do wonder at what point something like that comes about.